I'm Cynthia Rowland, and you're listening to EO Radio Show. This is our first in a short series on using AI for impact and helping nonprofits work smarter in the digital age. In this and the next few episodes, we explore how nonprofits can harness artificial intelligence to do more good more efficiently. Today, I'm joined by Atayee and Kirstie Tiernan from BDO. In this first of the 3 episodes, we're diving into Kirstie's journey building an AI-powered nonprofit from the ground up, and how small organizations can use tech to punch above their weight. Welcome to the EO Radio Show, your nonprofit legal resource. Brought to you by the Exempt Organizations Group at Farella, Braun & Martel. My name is Cynthia Rowland, and I'm a partner at Farella. I'm a business and tax lawyer with more than 30 years of experience advising clients on nonprofit and charity law. Through this podcast, our lawyers and guests will discuss a range of legal and business issues impacting the nonprofit world because we understand you work hard every day to make your community a better place to live and do business. Many of our programs focus on the basics, and at times we'll do a deep dive into narrow and complicated legal issues. Again, welcome to the EO Radio Show. We're glad you're here. Today's guests are Atayee and Kirstie Tiernan from BDO, which is one of the largest global accounting firms and has one of the largest exempt org-focused practices. Kirstie Tiernan is a principal at BDO Digital, where she serves as the digital market leader. In this role, Kirstie focuses on expanding BDO Digital's market presence by leveraging her expertise in data-driven innovation and strategic digital solutions. Kirstie also spearheads BDO's focus on artificial intelligence for clients. She leads initiatives that integrate AI technologies into business strategies, helping clients leverage AI to optimize operations, enhance customer experiences, and drive growth. I'm also delighted today to welcome back Atayee. Is a director at BDO, and his work focuses on assisting exempt organizations with various aspects of forensic analysis, investigations, and building sound internal controls. Welcome to the show, Kirstie, and welcome back to the show, It's so good to have you both here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Cynthia.
So, why don't you kick us off with an overview of what we're going to try to accomplish in our 3 episodes in this series?
Yeah, of course. So this series or this episode specifically is on AI on a shoestring, but it's part of an overall series that we're doing about nonprofits and using AI. There's obviously a lot of discussion about AI. It feels like you can't turn on the news or open any article and not read an article about how AI is changing the world or taking our jobs. Luckily, it is not at that point yet, where it has put us all out of a job, maybe soon, but not just yet. We seem to be at the stage now where there's a lot of interesting and exciting things that AI can do that are new and make our jobs easier. And so this podcast series was sort of inspired by that, where, we wanted to kind of talk through some practical applications, but through the lens of a nonprofit. And so we have a lot of good perspectives to bring to the table. I think we're really excited to hear about Kirstie's, experience with her own nonprofit. I think that's going to be really interesting. But, we had some kind of overarching themes that we wanted to cover as part of this series. So first was, wanting to educate nonprofits on how to practically and responsibly adopt AI. It is sort of the Wild West a little bit, it feels like, where there's so many different tools coming up every single day. And some of them can be really efficient and make certain manual tasks much more automated or much more streamlined. But there are responsible ways that we want to make sure that nonprofits especially are adopting these different technologies. We do have some early adopter insights and practical AI applications. I was just reading this morning on how UNICEF has used AI to analyze their donor databases to figure out how to maximize probability for their reach outs, what certain donors want to see in language and emails or communication updates, right? So, before there may have just been some generic email blast that went out to thousands and thousands of people, but it wasn't curated, right? They weren't looking at how to maximize the return on some of the database marketing that they were doing. But we also want to look at some more practical applications for smaller nonprofits, right? There's a lot of small mom and pop nonprofits that are just trying to figure out, we only have a handful of number of people anyways. We're very resource strapped. And, how do we make use of these technologies to try to make our lives easier? I think the case study that we're going to go through today is going to be really great for that. We're going to go through Kirstie's personal experience with her rural nonprofit, The Steamery. And just, understanding from the launch of a brand new startup nonprofit what are some real practical applications that Kirstie's applying in this startup, make it AI forward, make sure that the organization is using as much of the technologies and the efficiencies that are out there right now, but also probably learn from some of the mistakes as well, too, right? There's some things that you're kind of getting started and you want to see trial and error, what's working versus what's not. And then we'll also wrap up with the standpoint from a risk perspective, right? We're looking at governance issues, risk, strategic implications for nonprofits. So the first couple of points I went through were all positive things. We're like, these are all the great things you can do. Here's a practical application. But we do have to kind of caveat that there do need to be policies around some of these things. You can't just treat it like the Wild West. There is a risk component to this. And you do sort of have to have a strategy in place. Even if it's an evolving strategy, you do have to have a strategy in place to make sure that you can make responsible use of these different technologies and really help your organization. And we'll talk a little bit about management and what their role and perspective should be potentially, as well as from the board's perspective on AI adoption and how, they sort of work together. And we also, Kirstie had written an article that we had posted on the BDO website, as well as on different social media platforms around risk management, governance, and legal implications. There's a great article that we'll make sure that we post in the show notes, but we'll do an episode basically doing overview of, that article and some of the things like, vendor sprawl and all the different technologies and vendors that are out there and making sure that you're responsibly selecting those and, vetting those vendors and everything. So again, there's a lot changing. There's a lot going on. And so we're going to try to cover really the high level important points from an organization perspective, from a practical use standpoint. And then again, from a responsibility standpoint, how do we make sure that we're doing all these things in a responsible way that are not going to create new risks just because we're trying to make, certain tasks easier?
Yeah, this all makes me think about 30 years ago when I was a kind of senior associate, junior partner. I remember one of the senior women partners at a partnership meeting saying, oh, we don't need to spend so much energy on a website. Nobody's ever going to choose their professionals based on what their website looks like. And she was just adamant and absolutely convinced. And of course, that wasn't true. And I think it's the same with AI right now. People can say, well, that's interesting, but it's not for me. It's not for my organization. It doesn't have any relevance to me. And I just think that's not true. It's coming. It's going to look different every day. This episode, I suspect, will be obsolete in a fairly short amount of time. And so we'll have to do this again next year or maybe 6 months from now as the world evolves. But I do think it's really important for nonprofits to understand what's possible now and what the use cases are. So I'm really, really pleased that the two of you have offered your time to educate our listeners who may not really have thought too much about how it might really apply in their nonprofit.
Yeah. And I'll say too, as a non-techie person, maybe I'll label myself that way. Mm-hmm. I feel like this is one of the first times in my career where I can see a technology that came out and was widely available right away. Different tools like Watson, which is like an ERP, I think IBM's ERP system, and it's like a functionality within that. They've had an AI sort of agent, sort of machine learning model for like a while, but you had to basically go acquire a big fancy ERP system in order to get access to that. So this wave of new AI, mostly run by generative AI and like these LLMs, learned language models, it's the first like real, like a widely available use of these technologies that really any mom and pop, with a, Microsoft Office platform, I think Copilot's pretty much built into pretty much every Microsoft Office platform now. I think that's where before it may have seemed like sort of an exclusive or expensive thing for most organizations that was out of reach. Now it feels like pretty much anybody can have access to this, or even if you just have a ChatGPT account or something or any of the other LLMs. So I think that's why this is really exciting, because you don't need to be a big organization with a huge budget. Really, anybody has accessibility to these technologies. I'll hand it over to Kirstie now to talk through kind of her story. I kind of gave a brief intro on her nonprofit, but we want to have her kind of go through the startup and everything that they've experienced and how they've been using AI.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to be from the perspective of BDO and helping our clients implement this for a lot of nonprofits, and then also using it, not only in our firm, but using it with my nonprofit. So the nonprofit that we're talking about is the Steamery, and this was a community center. It was a vision for bringing education to our little town in Nashville, Indiana, Brown County, in this idea and this mission of educating adventurously. We have a lot of outdoor activities, hiking and artist community, and that's kind of our thing, right? We're a very small town, 3,000 people, but it's one of those places that a lot of people come to vacation. People have their cabins in the woods, right? Kind of thing. So we have a lot of amazing little nuggets of expertise and art and technology and people like me working here remotely that have these skills that are able to bring them to the rest of the community. The whole reason I started this nonprofit was because I wanted to figure out, originally when I was at BDO, as I'm at BDO and I'm trying to identify more diverse candidates for our AI team, we just didn't see the candidates that we wanted to be able to fill out that team. And what I wanted to figure out is why didn't we see more women candidates in the space of AI and technology? And so my kids, they're in 5th grade and 7th grade in the local school system here. And I said, well, let's go all the way back to the beginning and figure out where we lose these kids in STEAM across the way, right? Do we have them even as elementary school kids? So I started volunteering at their school by creating a coding club. And we had for a month, and I don't know how teachers do it, God bless them, because for an hour and a half a month, I did this coding club for kindergarten through 5th graders. And we probably had 40 kids sign up. And they would come in and they're so excited. And, I'm letting them play on the computer for an hour and a half. There's nothing better than, approved screen time. And so that was really exciting, but they quickly caught on. Everything was moving really fast and they started learning coding. And it was just amazing to see that. The nonprofit idea was, well, let's bring technology to the community as a whole. Let's bring AI to this community as a whole. And it's not just for the students, right? We want the students to grow up with us, but there's a lot of folks, adults that don't understand how to apply it in their own work, or could be doing side hustles or some way to make income off of AI. So it kind of grew from there. And just with the community that we're in, it just made sense to bring in the arts and music. And we ended up with a STEAM-focused community center, which is called the Steamery. And we're still in our visioning mode. We're doing a lot of fundraising right now and trying to get the building funded. But we have a lot of mission vision and a lot of offsite classes and programming that are helping us already start to complete that mission around educating everyone. That's so cool.
So Steamery is based on STEAM, science, technology, engineering. What's the A? Arts and math. So that's interesting because as we've talked about this, I didn't even know what Steamery was. And then my second question observation is, it's a bricks and mortar place. The nonprofit is not a virtual AI nonprofit. It's part of it, at least, is location based.
Right. The vision, we have a building. It's actually our old sock factory that used to be here years ago. And it's sitting there with about 12,000 square feet of empty space. The folks that own it are looking for a way to use that space. And so we would be leasing that space when it becomes ready. But for now, we can still do our mission virtually. So we're doing a lot of community events in different areas of the community and still trying to achieve that programming and education aspect.
Cool. Okay. So tie in the AI. Where did that come in?
So a couple things. One, we want to teach folks AI, right? And how to, like we said, build income streams and so forth with AI and how to use it in their jobs. But then we also realized we're doing this nonprofit and we don't have a huge team of people behind us. Everyone, including myself, has a full-time job, full-time family, all of the other responsibilities. And so many of us are also contributing nonprofits. So when I would meet with other executives and colleagues, everybody has a lot of the same issues and concerns. Is we want to contribute, but how do we do something at that scale with such little time? And that's where AI, I think, is creating just a different avenue for us and in nonprofits to be able to scale with a smaller team. And we're seeing it in our business with our nonprofit clients that they're starting to be much more interested. I think as an industry, I've seen nonprofit grab onto AI almost as fast as any other industry, which isn't typical for nonprofit to grab onto the technology so quickly, right? But I think they're starting to realize just the accessibility of it and how quickly they can utilize it and how quickly it can make a difference. And it's been making a huge difference for us from everything from grant writing to building our webpage to our social media posts and activity. Pretty much every area of the organization is being driven somewhat by either an AI agent or AI assistance in some way.
Kirstie, do you guys have any full-time employees?
We have none. We have all volunteers right now. Of course, we're still in the visioning stage, right? And we're still in the fundraising stage, but you have to have quite a presence at that stage for a community center of, a multi-million-dollar type of organization that you want to drive. So yes, it's all volunteer based right now.
Yeah. And I'm assuming, you wouldn't be able to do a lot of what you're doing, giving a limited startup budget if you had to have employees, right? If you had to have people in there writing grant applications, writing letters, writing emails, even with a handful of volunteers, there's no way you'd be able to work at that scale if it wasn't for technology and AI.
No way. 2 years ago, I couldn't have done this. There'd been no way. I can't even imagine the amount of time we'd be spending on our website content and, just all the things that are so quick and easy right now. It's a different world.
Yeah. So talk about that a little bit. What worked, what didn't? How did this evolve?
Yeah. So just thinking through some of the tools that we were able to use and how quickly we went. So the first thing we did, and just little things like figuring out what are the regulations needed to even organizing, right? We had done, obviously with BDO, we do setting up corporations all the time. But I think when folks don't know how to even set up a nonprofit, what reporting do I have to do? Using ChatGPT, and I use ChatGPT for this organization all the time. We have our own project set up, and everything that we do for the Steamery goes into this project as a knowledge base. So now I kind of have this agent or this thing that knows me, it knows what we're doing, and it can follow me along, right? So I would put things in, and you could say, hey, how do I set up a nonprofit? And it could walk you through that. How do I file my first 990? How do I find the area of the website with the government that I need to, there's just so much to navigate that step-by-step guidance was really helpful at the start. And I think could help a lot of people. Then it's all about structuring the organization. How are you going to organize your committees? What are your committee charters, right? When you're starting to get volunteers and people interested, they want to know how they can help. Well, if you're not in somewhat organized manner of here's the committees we think we need, here's the different phases, a lot of that can be driven through working with AI, having those conversations, and then iterating on that so that when you're walking into a donor or you have a new committee of volunteers that are interested, you have something to hand them. It just gets the organizational focus there much more quickly, and your volunteers can jump in and contribute immediately. And then you're giving your volunteers something to start with. So our volunteers, especially the ones that are out in the community talking about the Steamery and our mission, have a GPT that they have access to that's been fed everything that we have. So if they say, hey, I might have to answer a question about what tools we're using or what our phase 2 looks like or where we're at in fundraising, they can either ask me or they can go to this Ask the Steamery GPT and they can get the latest and greatest information that I've supplemented into that with a really solid answer that aligns with our brand and the way that the tone that we use and the words that we use and so forth.
Yeah. And Kirstie, are you referring to in ChatGPT? I know you can set up projects, right?
Yes.
So there's a function that you guys are using the project function to set up a specific project and say, hey, this is our startup nonprofit. Here's what we're doing. Here's all the basic fundamental aspects. And then it's working in that like kind of funnel or channel where everything all the feedback it's giving to you, it's within that lens, right?
Yes. And it's really easy when you're at that level, when you don't have donor information that you're analyzing yet, you don't have sensitive information. ChatGPT and setting up a project and being able to share that, or even creating a ChatGPT team where you can share that information, that's a really quick start way to get going.
So it's basically creating a personalized or customized playbook, sounds like, that anybody can access anytime.
Yeah, it's kind of, I call it our Steamery brain.
So how do you, well, I guess we'll get into on our next episode when we talk about risks and issues and so forth. That's a separate topic. But any lessons learned? Were there mistakes made? Was there any output that wasn't reliable? I mean, talk a little bit about what didn't work so well.
Yes. So, and I've seen this a lot with our clients too, because everybody wants to put together a chatbot. And the Gen AI chatbots are way different than our old chatbots on the websites, right? So you used to have an old website that you maybe have more of an FAQ type of interaction with. Now you have a Gen AI chatbot that sounds a heck of a lot better than any old FAQ one, and even humans sometimes, right? But if you're not careful on the instructions that you put into it, you can very easily be somewhat kind of socially hacked in those chatbots, right? So you can make it say something really silly, or maybe it doesn't have all of the details of your latest budget, and it gives out wrong information. and now someone sent that out, right? So you have to be really careful with the instructions. One, you have to have custom instructions that tell it not to give out its own instructions. We have a layer of instructions that are just around what it should and shouldn't respond to, and then how it should respond. You can get in trouble very quickly if you're not careful with how you manage the data and the knowledge behind it, making sure that it's updated and that it's controlled.
Yeah, that's an experience I've had with just my use of any LLMs, including ChatGPT, is, one of my main instructions I always use is be objective. Because I think a lot of people know, like, AI, these LLMs have sort of a confirmation bias where they want to make you happy. They want to agree with what you're saying, and they want to say, yeah, that's a great question, and let's go down that rabbit hole. But sometimes you need it to be objective, and you're asking it a question to get information back, not for it to just agree with you. So I think that's always a powerful prompting, or even the instructions before the prompting is like, for some reason, I always say, please. Maybe I'm worried about the future AI Armageddon or something, but I always say, please and thank you. And, no, please. But yeah, like telling it, please be objective in your responses to me, because I want to make sure that I'm getting the information right, not just you being nice to me, you as in the AI, and agreeing with everything that I'm saying.
Yeah. And Cynthia, to your point, one very specific example is we had an old free website that we did originally that was still kind of out there. And then we had our new website. And when I was testing the chatbot and the GPT, it was giving out the old website. Just very simple things that, you gotta make sure you test these things.
So how much time have you put into this as a startup nonprofit? I mean, there's always that question of, well, is it time to put into this free tool or inexpensive tool, or is it better to just buy something that's already out there? Some of the things aren't available to purchase, right? But some of the things are. I mean, there are treatises, there are books, there are publications that'll walk you through all the steps. Any thoughts or comments on how much time had to be invested? And you still are investing, right? Maybe you do some time every day.
Yeah, a little bit. Throughout the week, I mean, we're pretty regularly doing things like walkthroughs and donor responses and emails. And we just did podcasts last night, things like that, just to share the materials. But I would say, just the amount of time we've cut with the amount of manual effort is significant. I don't think it would be doable with us all having, what we have on our plates to be able to even complete this. I mean, we've been at this for probably about a year since we first envisioned the idea. And we're now at that starting to gather funds and donors and so forth. So it's taken a while to get to this point, but I don't think we ever would have looked nearly as professional and sophisticated and organized as we do right now without all the tools that we're using.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, budget-wise, I'm assuming, have you guys even started doing donor outreach and starting to solicit funds, or are you still sort of in the building startup phase where people are donating their own time, and maybe some of the original founders or your current volunteers are just donating their own funds until you actually get the outreach going?
We do have some outreach. We have a lot of local interest, and we have several donors so far, and we have several grants that we're waiting on responses for. But we have a $1.5 million raise that we have to do to get this thing off the ground. So we're less than $50K right now, which is where we're at. But I was very pleased to see that the efforts that we had have significantly shown our mission and relayed that very quickly to get us to the right network of people that I think I'm very certain about that fundraising being possible.
Yeah, I love the case study example too, because you said your town is 3,000 people roughly, right? Tiny town, right?
2 million tourists a year. So we have this really cool ability to leverage the revenue from tourists to feed our own community, which is what our little town has done quite a great job at.
That's great, because it's a small town and you have this tourist population that comes in, but if you could get this nonprofit off the ground and be successful, given the environment that you're in, other nonprofits that are in bigger cities and feel like they have even better opportunities, more opportunities to solicit funding from their local community that are most likely bigger than yours. I think this would be very inspiring for them, because they could say, well, if they could do it right on a limited budget and limited resources, then really any other startup nonprofit can also make it.
So one observation, and then kind of round out this session and then get very excited about our next session. ChatGPT has been a main contributor for the Steamery. We're not promoting ChatGPT in particular here. I think the world of the best tools will be evolving. Are there any other tools you want to mention that you either tried or would try at your stage of just starting up the Steamery? And then we'll kind of close out with any final thoughts from either of you on what it looks like for a startup nonprofit.
Yeah, when you're like us at the very, very early stage where you don't have your IT organization set up, right, you're going to want to deal with tools like ChatGPT, right? They're going to be easy to get going. Most of our nonprofit clients are using the Microsoft tools. So as I mentioned earlier, Copilot is probably the most prevalent tool, or some kind of in-house ChatGPT, which is often used through Microsoft's OpenAI Azure services. There's what a lot of our clients are turning on. And if you don't already recognize that you can have an internal version of ChatGPT through Microsoft, that's a really great thing to check out. We actually use it at BDO. We call it Chat BDO. And it allows us to then be able to really use it day in and day out within our jobs, but in, maintaining our data in a secure way.
Yeah. And that's a big topic for a future episode, is the security and risk management. But we'll leave that aside and close out this episode with just enthusiasm and excitement for startup nonprofits, and actually all nonprofits, to start seriously thinking about using AI and on a daily basis. So any closing thoughts, Sly or Kirstie?
Yeah, no, I'm excited for the future episodes. I think hopefully this was a good example of, again, like a very forward thinking startup nonprofit and how to best utilize technology from day one. A lot of organizations are probably trying to figure out how to adopt technology into their existing platforms. But this gives you a perspective of, if we're trying to make things more efficient and really embedding that in the culture of the organization, what could that look like? So hopefully that's some good motivational feedback for people as they think about how to apply these technologies to their organization.
Yeah, and we at BDO have a playbook for nonprofits that are more established. I think what'll be really interesting, and what we're working with, actually Indiana University, we're hoping to build out that playbook that you were talking about, Cynthia, earlier. Like, how can we help others to figure out how to do these types of things on the way, right? Do you start with ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude? There's so many tools, Otter, and how do you kind of figure out how to execute that at the very start? I think when we build that playbook, that could be really useful for a lot of people.
Well, great. Well, thank you both so much for introducing the topic. I'm really excited for our next couple of episodes. I think in the next episode, we're planning to explore how nonprofit leaders and boards can approach AI strategically and start thinking about, implementing it from the board and the leadership level. So that's all for this episode. Listeners, be sure to check out the show notes for links to resources that we've mentioned. Also, Farella, Braun, and Martel has a YouTube channel with organized playlists for all of the Nonprofit EO radio show past episodes. And we will be starting a playlist for AI topics. This is episode 1 in that series. So look for that and stay tuned for our future episode with Sly and Kirstie. And thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Cynthia.
I'm Cynthia Rowland, and you've been listening to EO Radio Show, your nonprofit legal resource, brought to you by the Exempt Organizations Group at Farella, Braun, and Martel. If you have suggestions for topics you would like for us to discuss, please email us at eoradioshow@fbm.com. That's eoradioshow@fbm.com. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, make a difference.